What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Today's video, we are going to do our early week 5 waiver preview. We are going to talk guys that you can pick up on waivers heading into week 5, players that you should drop from your roster, players that you should trade for or buy low, in other words, or that you should trade away or sell high. We'll also talk more specifically about teams heading into the bye for this week and how that changes your strategy heading into week 5, as this is the first week that we have teams on a bye this season, as well as other content as well heading into the next week of fantasy football. As always, if you are new here, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment. I reply to all my commenters, so please take advantage of that with any question that you have and ask them in the comment section. I love helping you guys out on your fantasy football rosters, and please take advantage of that with this small channel. So, before we get into the specifics of who I should pick up at each position, I want to talk real quick on the 4 teams that have a bye this week. We have the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Pittsburgh Steelers all going into their bye for this upcoming week. And I'm going to tell you whether you should buy these players or should you be trying to trade for these players on their bye, because maybe the owner may be 0-4, 1-3. They may not need certain guys that because they need to win this week 5, for example, or players that you should say bye-bye to or drop from your roster. So we will start with the Green Bay Packers. What do you do with Jordan Love on his bye? I would probably recommend holding him if you were in a single quarterback league, because he does show a lot of upside. He was a top 5 quarterback on the week. You'd like to see a little bit more performances like you did see on this week 4. I don't love him necessarily as a top 10 upside player for fantasy football, because they are, they have a great defense. They have Josh Jacobs. He's not always needed, but I would still recommend holding him if you can. Josh Jacobs, you're obviously, if you can trade for him or if you could buy him, that would be great. Probably not going to be able to do that at this point, though. Do you keep an eye on Emmanuel Wilson, though, as he did get some looks in this game as Josh Jacobs was dealing with a knee injury late, although it looks like he should be fine. For the Packers wide receivers, I think this is a good time that you can buy Matthew Golden. I think, he was the guy that was supposed to kind of step up in this game. It was actually Romeo Doubs, who I'll be talking about a little bit later on the waivers show. But I would recommend trying to buy Matthew Golden. Obviously, Doubs is somebody worth holding through this bye as well. The other receivers, Jayden Reed, if you are really desperate, I think that he could be dropped, as it doesn't look like he'll be back for quite some time. And then Tucker Kraft, this is another good week that you can buy him. I would recommend. He kind of had a down week this week, but should figure to be involved in this offense pretty heavily moving forward. For the Chicago Bears, and defense and kicker, I do want to actually, so going back to the Packers real quick, McManus doesn't need to be held through his bye week, but for the Packers, it's actually pretty interesting because they do have the Cincinnati Bengals coming off their bye week. So if you already own the Packers and you're a little bit disappointed from this Cowboys game, I would recommend holding on to them on your bench because they do get a great matchup in week 6. The Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams is the number 3 quarterback in fantasy heading into this week. Going to drop a little bit after this game today, but I would still recommend holding him because of that upside you do get with him and that Ben Johnson offense as he gets more comfortable with it. DeAndre Swift earned himself some more looks. I think that he's a good trade away candidate, though. I would not be surprised if we kind of see more performances of what we saw weeks 1 to 3. He is heavily involved in this offense, which I do like, but I think if you need some value to try to flip, if you have a losing record, I think that he's somebody that could be expendable. And it's likewise, if you're somebody that needs some running back depth, he's a good trade for candidate if you have a winning record, because he is getting so much volume on that team. For the wide receivers, Roma Dunze is a great buy. DJ Moore, I probably would hold, but I would not try to trade for him. Probably would not drop him either, though. Luther Burden can be dropped, as well as Olamide Zaccheaus. And then the tight ends, I think if you're really desperate for both these guys, you can drop them. But I'm going to talk about Kenneth a little bit later because I do like the amount of volume that he is getting in this offense here. The Atlanta Falcons, Michael Penix has a bounce-back game today, which was good to see for him. But I don't think he's worth holding through his bye. I would recommend saying bye-bye to him if you have him on your roster. Unless you're in a 2-quarterback league, then you would probably want to hold. For running backs, Bijan Robinson, obviously if you can buy him, that would be great. And then Tyler Algier, I think that he should probably be held through the bye, especially if you have Robinson, because he gives if anything were to happen to Bijan, then Tyler Algier would be a locked and loaded starter every week with RB1 upside. Drake London is very similar to what I described in the DeAndre Swift situation. London had a great game today that is really going to inflate his value a little bit in terms of how others will look at him. But if you're a team that's 1-3, 0-4 heading into week 5, you may want to look to trade him away to try to get some value that can help you for this week. On the contrary, if you are a winning team and you want to stash somebody through their bye week, Drake London could be good to do that as well. So that one kind of depends on your record heading into this week too. This week as well, heading into week 5, not week 2, like week number 2 I'm talking about as well. Kyle Pitts, I think you can hold him, but I'm going to talk about him a little bit later because he's a good trade away candidate, as I will talk about later. Pittsburgh, Aaron Rodgers, another bounce back game, but I would not hold him on his bye in a 1-quarterback league. I would say bye-bye to him. Both running backs on the Steelers should be held because we saw what Gainwell be very effective today in the absence of Warren, and Warren has already been good. So both these players, I think Warren is a better buy for me in terms of players that I would want to buy on their bye week, but for Gainwell, I would not really be looking to do that. This is probably just a 1-week occurrence for him. The wide receivers in Pittsburgh, DK Metcalf is a good sell candidate. I'll talk about him a little bit later. Calvin Austin, etc. on down in the receiving core, I would drop them on their bye weeks, and then same with both tight ends for Pittsburgh. All right, so we will go to the quarterbacks. I'm going to be talking players to pick up, drop, buy, and sell. I'm going to do that for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver, tight ends, and then we'll talk defense and kicker at the end of this video. My top quarterback pickup on this week is Jaxson Dart. Jaxson Dart showed today that he has a lot of upside, especially running the ball. He's very mobile. Unfortunately, the Malik Neighbors injury is going to hurt his long-term upside, but 10 for 54 on the ground, you really like to see that. 111 through the air, 13 of 20. So he showed some accuracy here. He looked pretty good. He looks a lot better than the number 1 overall quarterback. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But I'm talking about the number 1 overall quarterback in the NFL draft, by the way. But Jaxson Dart, I liked his upside of what we saw today, and I think that he's definitely somebody that you should put on your bench. If he shows this level of mobility through the season, he does have the potential to flirt with top 15 upside and really be a valuable player, especially in 2-quarterback leagues. The next quarterback I would look at, and this is more so a stream week by week, more intriguing for me in 2-quarterback leagues, though, Matthew Stafford. The addition of Devontae Adams has really elevated his floor quite a bit. Last season and the year before, we kind of saw Stafford plateau a little bit around that 15 to 20 range for quarterbacks with not a ton of upside, but he was the quarterback 2 on the week this week. And I think the combination of Adams and Puka, who looks like he could be the number 1 overall wide receiver in fantasy this season, is now elevating Stafford's value, that it does make him an intriguing option. He's only 40.9% rostered in ESPN leagues, and based on the performance today and the weapons he has, he should be rostered in every league in my opinion. We're getting more into the streamers now, but I like Tua with his upcoming matchup this next week. Tua gets I have to double check the exact matchup, but it is he does get a very good opponent for this upcoming week that I do like his matchup, and I can't believe I'm blanking on this right now, but I will get back to you about that. But I think that Tua is a great stream for this upcoming week. We're looking more at injuries now, but Cooper Rush is somebody that I really like for this upcoming week because of the value that he can give you if Lamar Jackson goes down with an injury. We've seen in the past, Cooper Rush be kind of successful for fantasy, and Lamar Jackson with the hamstring, I suspect that he should be okay, but if you're looking for a 1-week spot start against Houston, or if Lamar Jackson is going to be out for some time, Cooper Rush is a good speculative add in deep league formats. I think that would be a good opportunity to use him if you do have some of these short streams. He gets a tough matchup next week against Houston that will be a little bit challenging. But I do think that he's a good stream. And next week, the Dolphins get Carolina, by the way. So Tua, I think, it would be a great stream for this upcoming week because he gets the Dolphins, and we just saw what Drake Maye just did to them. So that is a great pickup as well. And then more so for quarterback benchings, I would be looking at these two players in deep leagues. Dylan Gabriel for the Cleveland Browns. Joe Flacco was terrible today. He was probably one of the worst fantasy performing quarterbacks on the week, except for maybe one other guy that I'm going to talk about. And hint, hint, he was the number 1 overall pick this year in the NFL draft. But Dylan Gabriel looks like he could be getting into the action sooner rather than later. They get Minnesota next week on an international trip. I would not suspect that they would throw him into his first start overseas, but I would be looking at when they come back as that being a possibility for him to get his first NFL start, and that Joe Flacco's clock is going to start ticking. Andy Dalton is another one I would look at because Bryce Young has really not taken a step forward. He looked okay in week 3, but on the vast majority of this season, he's been pretty rough. And if they're going to look like that, like they did today for another week, we may be seeing Andy Dalton step up once again. Just very disappointing development for Panthers fans. Drop candidates. So in the more shallow leagues, I would be looking to drop Trevor Lawrence if you still have him. He has not really taken the step forward that we would like. And although this team is 3-1, they're not 3-1 because of Trevor Lawrence. It's because of, just playing good complementary football. They've gotten the running game going effectively. Trevor Lawrence has not stood out among the rest of the quarterbacks that you have on the open market in terms of players you can pick up on waivers. I think he's a great drop candidate to me. Geno Smith, disappointing stream for this week, and I think because of the volatility that we've seen this year, I would just personally try to go elsewhere in terms of streaming options unless he gets a good matchup again. Not a great one coming up against Indianapolis this upcoming week. And then this next player, very disappointed in me. I did have high hopes going in for him this season, but Cam Ward of the Titans. I think in 2 quarterback leagues, you have to ask yourself if it's even worth rostering him at this point, because I know that he does have potential, or at least we've seen it, but this offense looks completely broken. This looks like the worst team in the NFL, and it's really just a bad omen for everybody on this team. There's 2 players that I'm going to talk about a little bit later that I think are still worth rostering on this team because of the upside that they could give you later in the season. But Cam Ward is creeping in that range where if you're in 2 quarterback leagues, you may just be better off trying to get one of these running backs or wide receivers I'm going to talk about later, because this team looks rough. I think Brian Callahan will be fired mid-season. Very disappointing that they have not been able to figure out an offense despite getting the number 1 overall pick in the draft this year. Buy candidates. So my first buy, and this is going to be the biggest name on this list, is Jayden Daniels. I bring this up because people that have Jayden Daniels likely took him early. They likely have been hurting this season because he has not played. And if they are in a situation where they are, 1-3, 0-4, they may be willing to part with Jayden Daniels for something else. So I would look in your league and see who the Jayden Daniels owner is, what their record is, because if they do have a losing record like that, they may be willing to part with him in redraft leagues. Will take a lot to get him, but I think it's worth it because I really like his upside later this season when he gets healthy and this team gets all its pieces kind of put together and how they want to run their offense. Smaller buys. I want to look at Daniel Jones again, who had kind of a down week this week, but I do feel that overall he's going to be a good fantasy asset throughout the season. I'm not so super worried about this week 4 performance we saw against the Rams. They are a good defense, and I think Daniel Jones, he's going to get the Titans again, so that's another matchup that you like. He's going to get Jacksonville twice later on this season. I think that there's going to be some good matchups for him going forward that I would want to try to buy Daniel Jones. He's got one of the lighter schedules among quarterbacks this season. And then other relative buys, Brock Purdy. Didn't have a great game today, but I think he will turn it around as these weapons get healthy on this team. They're going to get Kittle back. They're going to get Ayuk back eventually. Juwan Jennings will get healthy. I think this once all the pieces get back together, Brock Purdy will play a lot better. And then Jared Goff, kind of a down game today, but I think he is still going to be a great quarterback this season. Sell candidates, Caleb Williams. I think this is a good time to try to sell him if you can, because I like his upside, but I don't like him as top 5 upside. And if you can get a quarterback that's probably more likely to be top 5 upside like Jayden Daniels, maybe that might be worth it. Dak Prescott. So, number 1 quarterback on the week. And I like Prescott a lot in fantasy this season because I do see a lot of games like this in the Giants where it's going to be very high scoring and he's going to give you some great numbers. But I honestly feel that the name value of what you're getting from Dak Prescott, especially he's a huge name in the media, a huge name in the Cowboys nation. You can get a lot of value just off his name alone that I think it may be worth trying to use him in a trade to get one of these buy low players that I'll be talking about. Drake Maye, this is a good week to try to flip him off of a very high scoring performance against the Panthers. And then another one to consider in the deep 2 quarterback leagues is Sam Darnold. And I bring him up because he's played a little bit better of late, and you may think that, oh, well, he's kind of getting things figured out. He's got some nice matchups the next couple weeks. But if you look at the second half of their schedule, they have a lot of very tough matchups. And I think that this may be a good opportunity to try to sell him going into these good weeks for the next couple weeks, because later in the season, I think he's going to be a little bit tougher to hold on to given the schedule that they have coming up later on. We now move to the running backs. There's a lot of good running backs this week. We haven't really had a great running back waiver week for quite a while, but here in week 5, we got a lot of very good options. My number 1 out there is Woody Marks. And the breakout game today, Woody Marks, one of the guys that I called in my under 40% players to pick up in the video that I just made, he is somebody that I recommended to stash, but he went off. He had a total of 27.9 points, and he was the running back 6 on the week. Woody Marks has slowly been creeping up and getting more opportunity on the Texans. He shows a lot more juice than Nick Chubb. And he gets a great matchup next week against the Baltimore Ravens in a game in which I think they're going to continue to use him as they've been in both the passing game and the running game. But he got 17 carries this week, which was by far the most that he's had, and very clearly outpaced Nick Chubb. He also had 4 receptions for 50 yards. So all of that being said, I mean, this guy could be a real sleeper this season. The one factor to consider is when and if Joe Mixon comes back. They also have a bye week in week 6 coming up. But I think that he would be my number 1 pickup, and I think there's a very good argument that you can start him in week 5, given this performance and given the matchup. My number 2 pickup, and this player is going into his bye, but I still have him at number 2, is Kenneth Gainwell. And this is because, Jaylen Warren did not play this week, and he should be back for week 2. But I bring this up because Gainwell was so explosive in this game that I think there's a real chance that he can still be effective as a dual running back, with both of them splitting the load with each other. I think both Gainwell and Warren can both be effective as PPR pass catching running backs. And if anything were to happen to Jaylen Warren, then this guy becomes a very intriguing option with top 20 upside. So he's somebody that should be rostered in all leagues too. But more so if you're just looking for an additional bench piece, Woody Marks to me has more upside to potentially be somebody that you can plug in and start every week, and that's why he's number 1 for me. Next is Justice Hill, and this is very similar to Gainwell. There's a very clear ceiling with Justice Hill, and that is what we saw this week, which was 28.7 points, but he's not going to do this very often. But he was heavily involved in this game. They've been using him quite a bit as a change of pace back with Derrick Henry, and if Baltimore is going to continue to play from behind like this, we may see more Justice Hill moving forward. I don't have a huge opinion on how the Lamar Jackson injury affects his value. I think that either way we will see a little bit of Hill, but he doesn't give you the lead upside as somebody that really could be a reliable starter. He's more of a DFS play at best. And then another name I want to mention who's been getting a little bit more involved, much like Woody Marks, but more under the radar, is Zane Scott for the Minnesota Vikings. Jordan Mason, although I really like him, he's pretty limited as a pass catcher. And Zane Scott has been getting quite a bit of involvement as a pass-catching running back for the Minnesota Vikings, who has a lot of upside of his own. We've seen him get pretty involved in this game. He had 8 targets in particular. Carson Wentz likes to target the running backs and the wide receivers a little bit more so than the typical quarterback. And as a result, I think there's a good chance that maybe he could be heavily involved should anything happen to Mason. And he's somebody that should be rostered in the event of a Jordan Mason injury. It should kind of be treated as his handcuff moving forward. And then another name who's been getting a little bit more involved too, and this is one that I'm really keeping an eye on, is Kendre Miller of the New Orleans Saints. He got about half the carries for the Saints. The other one's coming from Alvin Kamara. I feel that there's a real possibility that Kamara is going to get traded this season, and I would be holding Miller in deep leagues because I think there's a real possibility that when Kamara leaves, that Kendre Miller will take over this backfield and become a effective spot start. Unfortunately, with Kamara, who I'll talk about in a little bit, it's kind of looking like he's going to be a little bit more of a streaming flex play than an actual RB1 that you can count on, because this offense is pretty limited in terms of its elite upside. But still, Kendre Miller, should anything happen to Kamara, should he get traded, there's going to be a lot of upside there. And then I always bring up the handcuffs. Make sure you're protecting your elite running back with his top backup. And the one I want to highlight here is Tyler Algier, because we saw Algier rushing touchdown today, very effective in the change of pace game with Bijan Robinson. I don't know why that blanked me for a sec. Algier should be rostered in every league. And I do apologize. I said his name was Zane Scott. It's actually Zavier Scott. I don't know why I was thinking Zane. But still, he's somebody that should be picked up, and Tyler Algier should be rostered in every league too. Who can you drop? Kyle Monangai, I didn't mention him necessarily in the Bears video when I was speaking on the Bears part of their bye, but I think that if you are in a situation where you have him as a deep running back and you need to get some other running backs that have more upside to step up, I would drop him over these names that I mentioned as pickups. Maybe he could get a little bit more after the bye week of involvement, but I think that because DeAndre Swift played a lot better today, I don't see that coming in week 6. And again, if you're desperate, if you need to start picking up some wins, this is now heading into week 5. I think Caleb Johnson is droppable in redraft leagues. There's just not opportunity there. If there was going to be more opportunity, it would be in the absence of Jaylen Warren, but he's still clearly not getting involved, and this is probably going to be a very similar situation throughout the season. And then these are running back rooms. And I'm generally not a proponent of dropping running backs. I would try to drop other positions more than the running backs because of all the injuries that can happen at that position. But you may want to consider dropping these 2 running back rooms, and that would be the Kansas City Chiefs and the Washington Commanders. The Chiefs have a pretty ugly committee going with Pacheco, Hunt, and now Brashard Smith, who is getting involved. The Commanders have honestly even worse of a situation. Krosky Merritt should still be rostered, but Rodriguez and McNichols, both pretty disappointing today. I think that their team is going to be heavily rotating their running backs around too. And these are the 2 teams, both the Kansas City Chiefs and the Washington Commanders, that I'm definitely keeping an eye on for Kamara trades, because he would fit like a glove in either one of those situations. And if you were to go there, then he jumps right back into the elite value that we typically want to draft him at. Who can you buy at the running back position? Derrick Henry, a couple down weeks, but he's going to get things figured out. This Ravens team is going to get things figured out. I'm not too worried about them, despite the fact that they're 1-3. Jordan Mason is another good buy candidate. Kind of a down week here in Pittsburgh, but I feel that they get Cleveland next week, which might be a little bit tough on paper, but I think Jordan Mason is clearly the best running back that they have there. I mentioned the pass-catching deficiencies, which we kind of saw Zavier Scott get a little bit more involved in, but Jordan Mason is still somebody I would be trying to buy. Trey Benson as well, a little bit disappointing first game. But this is a great opportunity to try to buy him because he's still locked and loaded as the number one running back in Arizona. They're going to get some good matchups, especially this next week they play Tennessee. So this is a great opportunity to buy Trey Benson because I think there's a great chance he can go off and be a top 10 running back in week 5. Travion Henderson, another great buy candidate to me. He's getting a little bit more involved in New England. Ramondre Stevenson is not doing much with his opportunities. So this is a great chance to try to buy low on Henderson as he's starting to get a little bit more involved. And then on deep league stash, Tajay Spears. And one of the few Titans, one of the two that I'm going to mention as players to still roster. I think there's a real chance that, so Pollard should still be rostered if you have him, but he's not somebody that I really feel like is a great value where he is. But Tajay Spears is somebody that I feel as the season progresses, he may get involved quite a bit more. I like him as somebody that you can stash or in very deep leagues could trade for a very cheap price. Players that you could sell, Javonte Williams is still balling out, but I don't think he gives you that elite running back upside that I would like. So if there's any way that you could turn Javonte Williams into one of these rookies like a Travion Henderson even, or a Derrick Henry, I'm not saying he's a rookie, I'm just saying guys that have been struggling, that you could use Javonte Williams' great string of performances in the first month of the season and try to buy a more productive and consistent player that has higher ceiling. I would recommend doing so. Woody Marks, I think there's a good buy or sell potential here with him because, as I mentioned earlier, this is just one game that we've seen. And if Joe Mixon comes back, what does that look like for Woody Marks' long-term outcome? I would see what you can get with him. But I do think there's a good chance that he becomes startable caliber player throughout the season. I would see what you can get, though, in return. Kenneth Walker, he got enough production this week to get 12 points, but this backfield is going to be a committee, and now that Charbonnet is back, they clearly prefer him around the goal line. I would be trying to move on from Walker in a trade. Tony Pollard, you can't drop him, but I would not want him on my team. I would be trying to sell to the manager of whoever that you're trying to trade with that Tony Pollard is, getting the majority of touches on his team. But Tajay Spears will be coming back soon, and I think they're going to eventually transition it to Spears. So if you can sell Pollard now, I would recommend doing that, with the caveat that whoever is going to take him is going to be taking him as somebody that will be their third or fourth running back, not a starting level running back. And then Alvin Kamara, right now he is not performing at the level that you want to for a starting caliber running back. I would recommend trying to trade him to somebody else who likes the big name of Alvin Kamara and may want to have him on their team. But there's a lot of concern for me with him that he's just not going to replicate the same value of what he's given you unless there is a trade. Next, we will go to the wide receivers. All right, so wide receivers, check to see if Wan'Dale Robinson is there. He is still highly available in leagues, but the thing with him is that with the Malik Neighbors injury, the torn ACL, it's probably likely that Wan'Dale Robinson is going to take over a vast majority of targets and be somebody that we can rely upon in fantasy. I would check to see if he's there, and he could very well become a weekly starter with the Neighbors injury. The number one name I would pick up, and this is another player going into his bye, Romeo Doubs. You'd be picking him up with the caveat of knowing that you wouldn't play him until week 6, but he gets Cincinnati in week 6. That is a great matchup for him. He's emerging as the number one wide receiver in Green Bay, 3 touchdowns today. He was the player that I recommended to start that was under 40% rostered for this week, so if you did that, you were likely pretty happy with the outcome today. But I really like Romeo Doubs moving forward, and as Jayden Reed is still injured and doesn't have a clear timeline of when he's going to come back, Romeo Doubs definitely in flex consideration moving forward for the foreseeable future. Other receivers I want to mention who had good games today, Jalen Tolbert, stepping up as a potential wide receiver 2 for Dallas with Pickens, the one right now with CeeDee Lamb out. Tolbert should be serviceable for the next couple of weeks as a flex play in deep leagues. And then Adonai Mitchell in very deep leagues. I like him as somebody that you can pick up on waivers. He's somebody that, the Colts they have a clear void that kind of needs to be filled with pass catchers. Pittman is there, but has a ceiling of what he can provide. Tyler Warren is stepping up as their top preferred option, and they need a consistent second receiver because Josh Downs not necessarily getting the job done. Adonai Mitchell has a lot of talent, former second-round pick in 2024. Can he get a little bit more involved as the season goes along? I'm very interested to monitor this situation. Other names that did well, but I'm not super bought into. Juju Smith-Schuster is getting the targets and a lot of the Rashee Rice looks in the meantime while Rice is suspended, but that's only going to be about for 2 more weeks. And then after that, Smith-Schuster will pretty much disappear from fantasy. And then Tutu Atwell had a nice overall performance today because of the long touchdown, but he doesn't give you the level of consistency that he's somebody that I would want to roster, so I would fade that waiver claim. Who can you drop at the wide receiver position? First of all, Calvin Ridley. I want to mention him. I was wrong on that. I felt that this was a potential breakout year for him with the offense getting Cam Ward. It turns out that, Brian Callahan is just not able to put an offense together. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Ridley is just not getting the job done. He has not scored in a single game over 10 fantasy points. He's had multiple games under 5. He's somebody that really, at this point, unless you're 3-1 or 4-0, you can wait this out. But if you need to start getting wins, I would just look there. And it doesn't get any better with this matchup against Arizona coming up, who's got a pretty good defense of their own. I would be moving on from Ridley, and at this point moving forward, I don't think I can really trust Ridley. He's 30 now. He's somebody that I think is pretty much on the decline in terms of fantasy circles. Other names of note that you can drop: Kayshon Boutte, just not really looking like somebody that's going to be stepping up as a wide receiver 1 on this team. Hunter Renfrow, again, a lot of opportunity, but didn't get the job done today. Despite a good week 2, I would probably move on from him. DeAndre Hopkins had a 0 today. And then if you are very desperate, I just want to bring up Travis Hunter. I would not try to drop him because of all the potential that he has, but I just want to bring up these next 4 weeks for the Jags. They get Kansas City this next week. Then they get Seattle, which is a very underrated defense. They get the Rams, which is another very underrated defense, and then they have a bye. So if you need wins, there's a very high likelihood that you're not getting anything from Travis Hunter for the next 4 weeks. So you might want to ask yourself at that point, another player who has not scored at least 10 points in any game this season, do you want to cut ties? And there may be an argument to do that. There's a lot of good receivers that I would still want to try to buy out there. Nico Collins is the one that comes to mind the most. He has not had a true breakout game yet, which he's gone over 20 points. It's going to cost a little bit more to get him, but I do think this is a good chance that you could try to buy low on him. Brian Thomas Jr. kind of falls into that same vein. Those are both 2 great players that I would recommend buying because they are the clear number 1s on their teams. Their offenses are not quite in sync right now in the passing game, but I do think it's going to get turned around. And I would try to get them now before their value goes up any higher. Tedero and McMillan, very similar situation. Unfortunately, this is kind of just limited by Bryce Young more so than anything. But I do think that, either Bryce Young will get benched or he will develop, and Andy Dalton will be able to get McMillan the ball, or McMillan and Bryce Young will figure it out. But he's getting too many targets right now. It's going to happen at some point. It's just he's probably right now in the flex tier more so than somebody that you would want to go out there and start every week. Chris Olave is another buy. Again, heavily involved in this team. His numbers weren't great today partially because they called that terrible play in the red zone for him to throw the Philly special, and that was an interception. But of low. Of names that you could buy low that are clear number 1s on their team, this is about as low as you can get, and I would try to see if you could put in a claim for Olave in a trade. You probably can get it done depending on what you're offering, and that would be a good deal for me. Ladd McConkey, down game today, but I do think he will bounce back relatively, but I don't love him as somebody that will ever really get up to that wide receiver 1 upside that what we were hoping for. And then another deep name to look at, the other Titan I will mention is Alec Eomanor. I think that he is going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team moving forward. I don't trust Ridley anymore, as I just mentioned. I would be trying to get Alec Eomanor to just put on my bench and see how this develops, and I think that he will become pretty reliable as the season goes along. Who can you sell? Marvin Harrison Jr. is a great sell candidate to me, just simply because he's coming off of a good game here, 10 targets, and we've seen the yo-yo effect of him from time to time. I think it's more likely that will happen than we will ever really see a true consistency of Marvin Harrison Jr. Deebo Samuel, so he's had some good performances this season, but he's been lucky to especially in week 2 and 4, to get late touchdowns in the fourth quarter that helped elevate his value. He got one here late in the end of the game that really kind of saved his fantasy day. I think this is a good chance to try to sell him, because once McLaurin comes back and is healthy, I think that they're going to start phasing things away from Deebo, and you could still take advantage of this window of time while we don't really know exactly when McLaurin comes back to try to trade Deebo for some good value. The 2 Chargers wide receivers, Keenan Allen and Quinton Johnson, are good trade for candidates. And ultimately, I kind of like the 3 of them, including Ladd McConkey, in kind of that same range. But I think that you're going to see a little bit of an evening out where McConkey will become more valuable and these other 2 values will go down. You could probably get more for Quinton Johnson right now, but Keenan Allen is a big name that has been in fantasy for a while. So I think those are both good trade-away candidates and to try to get some value in return, especially given the draft capital that they were taking. You could probably get some bigger names on this list, like I mentioned, higher. Like Ted McMillan, I would probably do that for these 2 players. Hollywood Brown. Again, great week 1, had a pretty good week today, but once you get Rashee Rice back, his value is going to go down quite a bit. DK Metcalf, this is a good sell off of a 80-yard touchdown. He's been pretty underwhelming in the other weeks this season. And then I want to mention Devonta Smith. This is more of a sell low, but I just don't think I can trust this guy in fantasy anymore. I don't know why he continues to get drafted as high as he does. He gives you some great performances from time to time, but he's really at this point the equivalent of a wide receiver that should be benched every week. So if somebody still believes in him, like I would, just see if there's somebody that really likes him and who may want to take a chance on him. I personally would never feel confident putting him in my lineup and starting him, because you never know what outcome you're going to get. We move on to tight ends now, and the number 1 tight end that I like for this week is another Carolina Panther of note, Tommy Tremble. He was 5 for 42 on 8 targets. He got a touchdown today. The 8 targets is what I really like. This team, as I've mentioned, they don't have a lot other than McMillan. Renfro not really getting the job done. Leggett had not been getting the job done, and he was injured. Jatavion Sanders was out. We have Coker on IR. Tommy Tremble has a good opportunity to step up over these next few weeks. They get the Dolphins coming up in this next matchup, and that's not exactly a very stout defense, for lack of better words. So I think that this is a good opportunity for Tremble to potentially go on a little bit of a run in week 5 and be a tight end that you might be able to stream for this week too. Cole Kmet, heavily targeted. I believe he got 9 targets today. In this offense with Ben Johnson, Cole Kmet has given you a solid floor, even with Colston Loveland there, that I would probably try to consider Cole Kmet for certain streams depending on the size of your league. And then 2 other names, I don't really like these 2 that much, but they have gotten 2 touchdowns this season, and they do have a void at tight end. Jake Tonjes in San Francisco and A.J. Barner in Seattle. Both of them are players that don't give you a ton of upside, but they've gotten 2 touchdowns, like I've said, this season. And with Kittle being out, with Seattle not really having a true tight end 1, there's a chance these 2 may be more involved as the season goes along. Players that you can drop. Cade Otton, that's a drop for me. Didn't get the job done today. There's a lot of other weapons there that they can go to. Chig Okonkwo, another Titan that should not be rostered. And then this is maybe a controversial name, but David Njoku. he's getting less targets now than Harold Fannin. The offense is spreading the ball around so much. There at this point are better options that you can get streaming than you can get from David Njoku. I would probably move on from him personally. Buy candidates at the tight end. I would be trying to buy Brock Bowers. He's been disappointing this season, but he's getting a little bit more involved slowly as he's recovering back from his knee. He got 6 targets today. I think that this is a good opportunity to try to buy low on him before he has one of these blow-up performances, which are bound to happen. I would be trying to make sure to get Brock Bowers on your team. This will not last all season. And then another good buy low candidate. This is in very deep leagues. Brenton Strange. We saw the target share come back this week, in which he was getting more involved again. You like to see that. And with this Jags team, there's the Brian Thomas struggles have been documented. The Travis Hunter adjusting to both sides of the ball has been documented. There's an argument that Brenton Strange should get more involved, and we saw him get 10 points today, getting some more targets. He's very talented. Sorry, he only had 7 targets. I don't know why I said 10 targets. He had 10 points, 7 targets. He's got 6 receptions the past 2 games. He's somebody that gives you a pretty solid floor and is a good buy low in my opinion. Juwan Johnson, another good buy low. Down week this week, but heavily involved and heavily targeted the past couple weeks too. And then Harold Fannin Jr. He's not been great since week 1, but he is still getting heavily targeted. And I think the Browns are going to utilize him as the season goes along. They're another team that may actually trade away Njoku, and if they do that, then Fannin will become very attractive. Remember, the Browns sold away quite a few players at the deadline last year, including Amari Cooper. And then who can you sell? Dallas Goedert was the number 1 tight end on the week. Constantly deals with injuries and constantly deals with other options there that they generally can try to throw to. I would try to sell Dallas Goedert this week, personally speaking. Kyle Pitts, and I say to sell him because, this is a good week here. We've seen, up and down performances from him this season, 12, 7, 7, and 18. And although that's good, I would personally be trying to sell him for the name value because I think ultimately Kyle Pitts, with how hyped he was coming out of college 4 years ago, there's a lot of people that still believe this is the Kyle Pitts breakout season. And I would be trying to sell him to somebody who may feel that is possible. And the good thing is that you have 2 weeks to do that through the bye. Now, I would probably recommend actually holding Pitts if you're not getting great offers, but still, I think there's a real chance that he could be using some package to catch you a big fish that can actually help you more than what Kyle Pitts can hypothetically provide you. And then other names, Hunter Henry, his value was saved a little bit today by the touchdown, but he only had 2 targets. And again, we see this yo-yo effect with him where he gets a lot of targets one game and then he falls on his face the next. I would try to parlay that into a trade as soon as I can. And then Dalton Kincaid, another guy who was saved with his only catch being a touchdown. Been pretty good this season, but I would try to flip him for a name that would be getting more consistently involved. Now we move to defense and kicker to close this video. There's actually some pretty good defensive streams that are pretty widely available. The first one I want to mention is Arizona playing Tennessee. Arizona is a defense that really should be is a pretty good defense in and of themselves, but playing Tennessee is looking like one of those teams that you just want to play whoever the defense is against them, and it will give you a good result because they are looking very brutal on offense. So now it's Arizona's turn, and they are very widely available in ESPN leagues, so I would pick them up and play them against the Tennessee Titans. Arizona is only 24.6% rostered, so they're out there in about 3/4 of leagues. Other good matchups that I like, the Giants playing New Orleans. The Giants did pretty well against the Los Angeles Chargers this week. I know it wasn't a great fantasy stat performance, but holding them to 18 points and winning the game, very impressive. And they get New Orleans this week, which might as well be, the NFC version of Tennessee, because they are another team that is looking like they're headed towards, if not the number 1 overall pick, the number 2 overall pick. Those two teams are the worst in the NFL, in my opinion. Indianapolis gets Las Vegas. They play who gets playing Geno Smith. They didn't have a great performance this week, but they have a lot of talent on that Colts defense. I think they will have a good stream value in week 5. And then Miami gets Carolina. Another good stream value because of Bryce Young on the other side. Kickers. So there's one kicker that I want to talk about this week who has been very good but was also undrafted. He's the kicker 1 right now. It's Jason Myers. He had 8 points, 17 points, and 13 points in his first 4 games of the season. And an underrated kicker that is widely available and gives you great stream options from a week-to-week basis. They get Tampa Bay this next week, which should be a high-scoring game. They're a good enough defense that Seattle, I think, will settle for field goals. He would be my kicker stream and pickup of the week. All right, that's all I've got for this video. As always, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. I reply to all my commenters, so please take advantage of that. And we'll see you guys next time. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Hope you guys have a great week and enjoy the rest of whatever is left of your weekend. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Bye.